Chapter 4. The Civil War. The young country grew quickly, and by the middle of the 19th century it had 31 million people. But there were serious differences between the North and the South. And in 1861, a terrible war started. At least 600,000 people died in the battles or from disease. The war began because the southern states kept slaves to work in the cotton fields, but slaves were not allowed in the North. People from the South wanted to have slaves in the new lands of the West, but people from the North argued against this. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected 16th President of the USA. He belonged to the Republican Party, which did not want people to have slaves. On the 24th of December, South Carolina said that it wanted to be independent, and the other southern states soon followed. The fighting began on the 12th of April, 1861, at Fort Sumter. The South had some of the best soldiers. One was the famous Robert E. Lee, and they had plenty of money from selling their cotton to Britain. But the North had more men and more factories. They also had Lincoln, one of the best presidents that the USA has ever had. He was born on a farm in Kentucky, but he worked hard in order to learn as much as he could. Lincoln made the Republican Party strong and spoke about rights and freedom. A very important battle was won by the soldiers of the North at Gettysburg in Pennsylvania in 1863. Lincoln spoke there afterwards about the brave soldiers who had died. This became known as the Gettysburg Address and contains the famous words, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people." Two famous soldiers helped the North to win the war. General Sherman is remembered in a famous song that tells the story of how he took 60,000 of his soldiers on a journey of 400 kilometers from Atlanta in Georgia to the Atlantic coast. In this way, he cut a wide path through the southern states, and after that, it was hard for the armies of the South to join together and fight the North. After the war, Sherman became head of the American Army. General Ulysses S. Grant represented the North at Appomattox in 1865, when the South, under Lee, accepted that they had lost the war. Grant was very fair to Lee's soldiers, who did not have to go to prison. Some years later, in 1868, he became president. Sadly, on the 14th of April, 1865, 5 days after the end of the war, President Lincoln was shot at the theater by a man called John Wilkes Booth, who hated Lincoln and was angry about the war. After Lincoln's death, the new president was not strong enough to bring the North and the South together, and people continued to argue about the rights of black people. During the Civil War, Louisa May Alcott wrote her famous book, Little Women, about a family of 4 girls living at home in the North with their mother, while their father was away at the war. Another very famous book, and later film, about the war is Gone with the Wind, written in 1936. It tells the story of Scarlett O'Hara, a rich young girl who was living comfortably in the southern state of Georgia when her life is destroyed by the war.